Good morning, all, and welcome to this week's episode of the CEO Momcast. I have with me Dr. Cathleen Brown, the founder behind By Winona. Now, if it's not something you've heard of, I'm going to have Kathleen give us the lowdown on it today. It is for us moms, but more so for women entering their 40s and experiencing difficulty with menopause and premenopausal symptoms. But Kathleen, I'll let you take it away.
Hi there. I'm Dr. Kat Brown. I'm the medical director of Winona. So I'm an OBGYN and I've been board certified now since 2009. Winona actually is an online, one of my cats is going to come join us here. It's an online telemedicine platform that provides midlife care for women that are going through perimenopause and menopause, basically because the problem in America is that so many providers and doctors everywhere, let me just get him off, are so afraid to prescribe hormone therapy for most women just because of studies that have been done in the past and some bad press and bad information that's been out there about hormones. And there's just been this general rhetoric in everybody, I think, in the public that women are afraid of hormones and everyone's afraid of taking anything. And so women have been suffering in silence. There's been a huge aspect of just not having access to care and women just not getting the help that they need. So Winona was founded to basically help bridge that gap and help to bring care to women who need it. And we really specialize in taking care of women that are low risk, that are good candidates to take hormone replacement therapy, and that it's going to do great things for them. So it's adding a nice complement, to a patient's in-person care because, obviously we can't do everything through the computer. So it has to be complementary to still going to the doctor and still having a physical and still doing all the things that you should do to take care of yourself. But it's that added piece that a lot of women aren't being offered, that they could really benefit from. So
That's great that it's online, easily accessible. Are you guys seeing customers from all across the United States?
yeah, so we started out actually in California is where the company started. Basically, it was founded, and our chief medical officer, Dr. Michael Green, was the first doctor who worked for Winona. And then he expanded to states like Texas. And then when he decided he wanted to expand into Pennsylvania, he contacted me. We both worked as OBGYN hospitalists. And he just contacted me and said, "Hey, I've got this online company. Are you interested?" And I was like, "Who is this? And where is he contacting me from?" But then the more I learned about the platform and the more I found out about what they were doing, I was actually simultaneously going through my own perimenopause changes myself. And so I was genuinely very interested because I had also personally hit a roadblock. Like, even as a physician, going to my family physician who knows very well like what I do for a living, like I'm an OBGYN, and I went to my family doctor saying, "Hey, I'm starting to experience hot flashes and night sweats." And her initial response was, "You're too young. You're not ready for this. It must be stress. It must be anxiety." And I was like, "Okay, I can appreciate that, but like I'm telling you it's not, because I've had those before and I've never had these symptoms." So like even as a board certified OBGYN, like I was given a roadblock, like a complete block from it. It wasn't even a part of the conversation. And so, but yeah, so then we expanded from those 3 states. We were in California, Texas, and then Pennsylvania. Now I want to say we're in 33 states across the US now.
Wow.
Yeah, so we're hoping to, add more, but each state has their own, laws for telemedicine and how you practice and that kind of thing. So, it's one of those things that we have to do state by state with the expansion to make sure that we're doing things right and that like the legal team is getting everything up and running appropriately. So.
Great. Now, where did the name By Winona come from?
It's interesting. I actually wasn't with the founding partners that started the company. And so I don't really have a great answer for that. Somebody had told me once where they got the name Winona. But I have to look into that and tell you more about that background story because I can't remember it offhand.
Okay, no worries at all. I wasn't sure. It's just such an offhanded name for something related to women. There's nothing to do with the words menopause or anything in there, so I wasn't sure if it was something
Yeah.
special. Um,
But
but
it's
so you've
funny. I
already
think all of the other companies in the menopause space all have interesting names that are not menopause related either, which is weird.
Weird but great at the same time, because it kind of makes you not focus on the problem. Like it
True.
doesn't
That's
seem like,
true.
and you're noticing that with a lot of businesses these days. Like there's new supplement companies out there, just hers. You know exactly who they're for, and you have to do your research to find out what you're getting, really. But
Right. Exactly.
I think it gives that interest so that people are looking into things and finding out more about it before just dismissing it as, oh, it's just another company for this.
Exactly. That's true. That is true.
So we've touched on your specialties and how you got started with Winona. Can you tell us what sets By Winona apart from others in the industry that are offering these services?
Yeah, so right now, I'd say compared to a lot of the other companies that are out there, especially telemedicine, companies, I mean, we're glad that they're out there because we just want patients to get help. But we're the only ones that are really offering compounded bioidentical HRT through an online telemedicine platform. So the other thing is too, we are an asynchronous telemedicine platform, which the main thing you think about when you think about telemedicine, you think of scheduling like a video visit, like a call, like you and I are having right now, which along with that still entails having to get on the doctor's schedule, waiting for an appointment, maybe scheduling 3 weeks from now. Whereas when you have asynchronous telemedicine, the beauty of that is you don't need the live visit, which is actually kind of nice. So we have this online adaptive questionnaire that really gets to the meat and bones of what we need to know about a patient's health to determine if they're a good, safe candidate. Because our first objective is to first do no harm, right? We want to make sure we're providing safe care and not putting anybody at risk. So it goes through their medical history questionnaire, their medications, anything pertinent that would make them a not great candidate to take hormone replacement therapy. And then what happens is if they go through that whole questionnaire and they go through with the onboarding process, their chart comes to a doctor like me to review, and I review their medical history, go over everything. If there's anything in their onboarding questionnaire that I'm not quite sure about, or I want clarification on, or I want to know why they're taking a particular medicine, I'll message them, but then they can message me at their convenience, right? So they can message the doctor whenever they want to. I can message them whenever I want to. If I can't sleep at 2 a.m. while I'm waiting for a baby to be born in the hospital, I can message patients. Or if they're up in the middle of the night experiencing night sweats and they're thinking, God, I really need to talk to my doctor and change my dose, they can hop right on their phone or on their computer and message their doctor right then. You're not waiting like a month down the road for an appointment to finally get your concerns addressed. So that's one of the main things I think. And then also the compounded HRT has been really, really helpful and really loved by a lot of our patients as well. I'd probably say that's probably our most popular form of HRT that we're prescribing is a compounded body cream that has estrogen and progesterone in it. So we have pharmacists that are making that solely work for Winona. And so it's nice. A lot of patients like having a topical form of medication rather than taking pills because there's less side effects and less risks with, taking transdermal or through the skin medications compared to pills. So that's the main thing. And I think that of all the online telemedicine companies out there in the menopause space, I think that we're quickly growing to be the largest, and we have the highest amount of like the greatest patient population right now. So I think that we're really proud of it because we really would just want to help women through this.
Good. Now, you talked about the asynchronous care. Do you feel like that is the future of medicine? It's kind of leaning towards like a concierge type medicine?
I think it could be. I think that patients really want things that are more on their terms. And I don't think it's for everybody. Like every once in a while, I get a patient that comes through that, wants to meet with someone in person. It's the way they've always done it. And when they find out that we're asynchronous and we message back and forth, they said, oh no, like I'm not tech savvy. I don't want to do that. Or, they might get thrown off by that. So I think it really is important to set expectations, but I think that many, many patients really, really like it and they like the convenience of it. And ultimately, they have access to me 24/7. They can just send a message, which is really kind of
Right.
nice. Yeah.
Right. Some family medicine practices are even getting to that now. You message your kid's pediatrician. You might not hear back till the next day, or you might hear back from the nurse, but it's a lot easier than sitting and waiting on the phone or
Oh,
waiting for that
yeah.
appointment. And you're right, it's convenient because it's at your own terms. Like, well, I was sitting here waiting to talk to you. I was scheduling my son's well child visit because it's December and I want to make sure we get in. But it's easy instead of waiting and calling and all these
Oh
things.
yeah. Yeah. Using like all the patient portal type access.
Mhm.
I definitely think it gets us more availability at our fingertips for sure. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I know you and I talked about this beforehand, but how do you balance your personal life? Because you are still an OBGYN in the hospital as
Mhm.
well as doing this.
Yeah. So, I mean, the big difference is that I don't practice full scope obstetrics and gynecology anymore. So I used to. I was in the Army for 12 years. And then after that, I was in a private practice where, I did the office Monday through Friday. We had surgery days. And then we also rotated call where we covered labor and delivery. Now I work as an OB hospitalist. In some hospitals, they call them laborist. So this is basically meaning that, basically when I work in the hospital, I'm just there. I'm there inpatient only. I don't have an outpatient presence. And so what happens is that, I see patients, when they're, you know, at the hospital, when they come into labor and delivery, when they come into the emergency room, but I don't actually have an office where I see patients for appointments and things like that. So that's a main difference. So that I have a lot of downtime when I'm not at the hospital. So when I leave the hospital, the work stays at the hospital. And then when I come home, I'm just focusing on my Winona telemedicine, gig. So I'm working on taking care of patients' charts and reviewing their records and that kind of thing. So that way, I can really just focus on the telemedicine aspect of things.
And you are a mom and doing this
Yes.
as well. Is it hard to balance in that priority?
It can be. And you can see my teenager just got home from high school in the background. I'm going to turn my camera so he cannot be on the podcast. But anyway, yeah, it definitely is a juggling act. So I have 3 kids. So my oldest is 16, he'll be 17 next month. Then I have an 11-year-old who just had a birthday yesterday, actually. And then my youngest is 7, going on 8. She also has a birthday at the end of September. All my kids are kind of within a month of each other as far as birthdays go. So it is a juggling act, but I think that one of the things that I have had to do, I mean, there's been times my daughter, who's my youngest, has kind of whined to me saying, like, are you going to be here tomorrow? Are you going to be at the hospital?
Mhm.
And really wants me to stay home. But like when she was in kindergarten, I was her classroom mom. I never had the opportunity to do that ever before when I was a full scope OBGYN.
Right.
But doing telemedicine and then also doing the hospital shifts, like when I work at the hospital, I do a 24-hour shift. So I typically work from 8 a.m. to 8 a.m. the next day, but then I'm off for like 3 to 4 days at a time in between those hospital shifts. So, I'm able to schedule the things like, and somewhat adjust my schedule so I can be more available for the kids. If they wanted me to go on a field trip or that there's like a home and school meeting or something like that. So I'm more involved now than I ever was when I was doing a regular, like, office job
Yeah.
and doing the labor and delivery call on top of it. So, I mean, I think it's a juggling act no matter what you do. Even if you're a woman and mom in corporate America, like trying to figure out, like, I was always the mom when I worked full time, Monday through Friday, that was sending in paper plates and napkins every time they needed something because I could never send any food in because I was always at the hospital. But we do what we can, and I think that, I think it sets a great example for our kids to see us working and being successful, and especially doing things on our own terms and prioritizing because it's teaching them the importance of balance too.
Right.
I think that that's always a good thing as well.
It's funny. You almost sound like a replica of myself. I mean, I work 12s at the hospital instead of 24s, but my kids notice when I do a 3 or 4 day stretch, they're like, they haven't seen you and,
Yes.
super whiny and can you? And yes, trying to fit in all these things and but that is kind of why I like hospital life because you do your stretch, you're off, you have that flexibility to
Yes.
do things. And I'm the mom who's at the grocery store at 6 o'clock in the morning before her shift, picking up whatever's needed for the party. I'll be back,
Nice.
guys.
Yeah. Yeah. You got to do what you got to do, right?
Right. And you're right. Like, I mean, corporate America is probably exactly the same, except you're held to the Monday to Friday, and it is really hard. So it's always the toss up that we've had too. Is like, I could go and get a Monday to Friday job, but then I have no flexibility to be there for the things that you guys need. So yeah,
Exactly.
working weekends sucks, but
Yeah. But you don't work
yeah,
every single weekend necessarily.
no, no, no.
It rotates. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So.
Um, so tell us about your support system then. Winona is obviously expanding, bringing more people on board.
Yeah. So right now our goal, I mean, Dr. Green is kind of our recruiter for bringing on other docs. Like we've brought in people that we've both worked with, and then, had other doctors be interested, but we're trying to get every state to have at least a few docs that are credentialed in that state, because you have to, depending on where you're located, you have to have a physician that's authorized to prescribe in that state with a state license. So I prescribe for patients in Pennsylvania. I also prescribe for patients in Florida and Michigan. And then I trained in Hawaii, is where I did my residency in the Army. So I still have a Hawaii license. So I take care of patients in Hawaii remotely as well. And so we're trying to do that so that we can kind of cross cover each other. And then also, I mean, as far as my support system, my kids are a huge part of that, my husband. And then I think it's important. One of the things that I think is so very important that not enough women do, as far as, we think about self-care being like massages and facials and pedicures, but honestly, it's getting regular therapy when you need it. It's having a support network of people in your life that you can go to, like when you're feeling anything at all that seems to be an impediment to like your progress or your growth, that people that can help lift you up. And so some of that, I have good friends that I could call at any time and, talk to them about whatever is going on. I think that that's such an important thing to have people in our lives, friends and family. So I think that's important too. And then also for me, a huge part of my own wellness is just getting outside, and like this morning after I got all my kids off to school, took the dog out and I spent like an hour in the garden picking tomatoes and pruning, plants and things like
Mhm.
that. Like that hour of doing that is worth so much more than any medication I could ever take. It's so very important. And we each have our own way. Like some people like to go hiking, some people like to go do whatever, go for a walk. But I think having like a practice, or whether it's meditation or yoga or something that gets your body moving, something that gets you outside, because I think being outside is so good for our soul, and so to me, that's a huge thing for me. So in
That's so
bad
true.
weather, when we have bad
Yeah.
stretches where it's like dark and dreary, I'm like, I need to get outside. It needs to break.
There is a reason for seasonal depression in the winter when you cannot get that
Absolutely.
outside time. I mean, I know they stay still, get outside, even though it's cold. It's just, it's not the same. Like the
Yeah,
sun's not out, you're just not feeling it.
exactly. Exactly. I totally
And
agree.
and people do overlook that as a form of self-care. You don't even think about just going and drinking your coffee outside in the morning to get that vitamin D as a good form of
Yeah.
self-care.
Yeah. I think
Now,
that too often we're like looking at our phones and trying to stay up with everything. But if we just take like a short amount of time for ourselves just to kind of regroup or do something that makes us feel good, we would have such a more productive day if we started
yeah.
off the day like that every day.
And it's so hard to disconnect because everything is so easily accessible. But I know that I've done it a few times this summer. And then I almost feel like I'm apologizing to people that I didn't get back to them, or no, I didn't take pictures of the day at the zoo because I was just living it with the kids.
Yeah,
But that's a that's a whole personal thing, right? Feeling guilty for not being there for other people. But it's hard when you're so used to having your phone in your hand or your watch telling you when somebody's text you.
exactly. Yeah,
Mhm.
so very true.
So obviously most of us know med school is a huge commitment, that undergrad, the med school, the residency. What helped you get through that and what ultimately made you decide to be an OB with so many specialties out there?
Yeah. So, I mean, I have wanted to be a physician since as long ago as I can remember. Like my mom kept one of those books, like one of those school year books that I mean,
Mhm.
I've gotten them for my kids, but my books for my kids are like half done, I would say. But like every year, when they're in a new grade, it's like, you fill out who their friends are, what their favorite subject is, what do they want to be when they grow up? if you look back in the old book that my mom did for me, I think it always said doctor. It said like doctor slash ballerina, doctor slash rock star,
Right.
something like that along those lines. But so I don't understand or remember exactly when I first had the thought that I wanted to be a doctor, but I remember really liking my pediatrician when I was a kid. And I think I just, looked up to him and, really thought this seems like a fun job. Plus, he had really cool hobby horses in his lobby and he gave us pretzel sticks and lollipops on the way out. But anyway, going through college, just studying hard and just once it became a reality, like I took my placement exam, which is called the MCAT, and getting into medical school and going through the admissions process. Once you get in, I think that's the hardest part. After that, it's like the work is not difficult. The amount of information you have to study in a short amount of time, that's what's difficult. It's like the time management, the squeezing the knowledge in. And I think so much of higher education, it's not that the material is so technically difficult that it's obtrusive for people to be able to do it. I think it's just an exercise in perseverance and that you're willing to follow through. Because I think if you put the hard work in, like anybody could really do it. And that's what the disqualifier is, that just not everyone does it because they're not willing to make the commitment.
Mhm.
But honestly, school was one of those things that always kind of came easy to me when I was younger. And then when in college, when I got to things like, physics, and then in med school, biochemistry is when things started to get a little hairy. And I was like, oh my God, I can't just show up to the lecture anymore and just learn it and know it for the test. Like I actually had to study. But it was one of those things that I've always enjoyed. And I've always loved school. And it's just that sense of accomplishment when you're, helping somebody is what really flicked the switch for me in med school. Like when we really started to see patients, because the first 2 years are all didactic in classroom. You do some like standardized patient encounters where you get to practice with actors and practice your skills on interviewing and doing physical exams. But then the second 2 years of med school are all clinical based. And so each month you're trying on a new specialty, like you're trying on clothes, like you do a month of pediatrics, a month of radiology, a month of OBGYN. And so it's kind of nice because you get to step into their world for that time period and to see what it's like and to see what that specialty is like and to see if you really enjoy it or not. And everyone that I was working with, especially in the primary care arena, kept finding out that I was really good at women's health. And I kept gravitating toward it, even though in my mind I was like, no, I'm going to do pediatrics or family practice. Like I was going to be a primary care doctor. But everything I did, I kept coming back to women's health. And then a good friend of mine in med school was pregnant with her second child and decided that she was going to give birth at home, which was, back then I didn't know any better because I was a med student, but she said, I'd love for you to be there and like be my doula. And so I did doula training and learned how to be a birth attendant to support a woman through that journey because I was just so interested in childbirth. And seeing her deliver her baby was like open mind me, like awakening for me, really, like that. I was so full of adrenaline and so full of joy, and just so much came from that experience that I was like, I think this is what I'm meant to do. Like, I'm meant to deliver babies. Like, this is what I'm going to do. And I had had some bad experiences personally with women's healthcare, like going to my first gynecology visit and, talking to so many friends and family members and hearing all their negative experiences of what it was like having their first pap smear or going through anything. And I thought, well, maybe I can change that. Like maybe I can make it different for women, and maybe I can be that doctor who listens a little better and makes the speculum hurt a little less and makes it a little warmer and less cold, little things like that. And that's really what kind of drove me into OBGYN is that, I just fell in love with all those pieces of it. And one night when I was on call as a medical student, a resident said to me, like, do you really want to do this? Like, are you interested in OB? And I was like, I am. He's like, well, you're really kind of good at it. But, what you have to think about is if you're sleep deprived and if you're hungry and if everyone around you is a bitch, would you still be happy doing what you're doing? And I was like, yeah. He's like, okay, then you should do this.
I feel like that's in any department though, because let me tell you, the ER sometimes is a little dicey on whether or not you get to eat, and you can see it comes out in people.
Yes, yes. But like if you're hungry and you're tired, like do you still love the work? Does it still give you that drive? Like do you still love
Yeah,
it, you know? And I was like, yeah, I think that no matter what, if you put all those things in the equation, like I would still come back to OBGYN.
good. It's good that you found a passion because, like, let me tell you, an OB patient walks through the door in the ER and we're like, how far along are they? Can we get them upstairs? Can we get
Can
them
we wheel them
upstairs?
up
Can
in
we
a
get them
wheelchair in
upstairs?
the secret elevator as
And
fast as
OB's like, no, no,
possible?
no, it's yours this time. And we're like, oh,
Yes, yeah.
you
I
either
think
love
that
it or hate it.
that we definitely have that experience. A lot of my ER colleagues, I go down there. Although it's fun, it's funny though, because sometimes I'll go downstairs for ER consults for GYN patients, and some of the nurses are genuinely like fascinated and want to know what it is I'm doing, and they're like, "Can I look?" And I'm like, I ask the patient, I'm like, "Do you mind if she takes a peek?" Because they'll be helping me like do an exam, and they like to learn and see stuff too. They just want it with the comfort of having somebody there.
Right, right, yes. And sometimes when somebody comes in the ER to deliver a baby, it's like now or never. So we're just
Yes,
kind of no support. Let's figure this out.
exactly, exactly.
Now, for somebody who will be starting out in your field, what is some advice you could give them? I mean, even a book recommendation, a podcast, something to help you get through.
There's an OBGYN right now who has a podcast who's absolutely wonderful, who's helping doctors like with burnout and helping them navigate things and remember why they did what they're doing. She's called the Happy Gynecologist. Her name's Dr. Miles. So that's a really good podcast to listen to. But I mean, honestly, when someone's just starting out in the career, like they still have that fresh sense of idealism. And I think it's just so important to learn as much as you can and really get to see the nitty-gritty of a job before you jump in, to really know like what is it that you're getting into. I mean, one thing about medicine, and I think whether you're a physician or whether you're a nurse, is that you can kind of change and pivot your career, and you can decide, to do one thing and one type of nursing or one type of being a physician. And then if you decide you want to practice a little differently, you can kind of fine tune your practice a little bit. I mean, I spent the bulk of my career really focusing on OB and on prenatal care and delivering babies. And we didn't spend a lot of focus. I mean, yes, we saved women from horrible periods and, trained in hysterectomies and birth control management and things like that too. But so little emphasis was ever placed on women aging and women in midlife. And then it took me getting into my own 40s and starting to experience this wondrous change that I realized like my education was totally inadequate and we didn't spend enough time on this. And so now like I've pivoted my career, and now my primary focus when I'm not at the hospital and when I'm working for Winona is really helping women navigate that, because I'm going through it too. Um, and it's just one of those things that's like kind of a reflection of society too, right? So if men went through such a horrible change in their 40s to 50s that changed how they could focus and changed how they felt and affected them on a daily basis, do you know how many research dollars would be thrown at that problem?
Right,
But
right.
because it's happening to women, and you know gender inequality is still a real thing and it's something
Mhm.
we fight every day, we're still fighting to make this part of the dialogue. And it's finally starting to become like, there was a commercial during the Super Bowl a year ago about, vasomotor symptoms and menopause symptoms. And I was blown away. Like, oh my God, it made it to a prime time Super Bowl commercial. And now you see stars speaking up, like Oprah speaking out. And, Holly Berry even started talking about her menopause experience. You have people, actresses and comedians starting to talk about it in their routines. It's like, it's no longer hush hush. It's kind of reminds me of the way that like years ago women had to hide pregnancy. Like it wasn't ever discussed. And like
Right.
on TV sitcoms, like she would just get fat and suddenly there'd be a baby in the next episode. Like, it's just like it was so much of women hiding and suffering in silence and it not being part of the dialogue, and then as a result them not getting the care and the help that they needed. And now like we're changing that tide, and I think that the more we talk about things and the more that the information's out there, it can only help everyone.
Do you think, like, I think that that's great, and you're right. The topics are changing. People are feeling more comfortable talking about things, not even necessarily just with their providers, but with friends, and finding out, hey, I'm not the only one going through this. And so many different social media platforms that are covering these topics. We have easier access, but do you still find some of these problems are really easily dismissed
Oh yeah,
by care providers?
absolutely. Absolutely. I think more often than not, when women come in and have a vague constellation of symptoms, they're being told they have anxiety or depression and they're being put on those kind of meds instead of actually getting to the root of their problem, which is the changing hormonal environment in their body. And so I do think that there's still, I mean, and whether the provider is male or female, I still feel like a lot of it's, you know, a lot of people, a lot of providers think it's in a woman's head. Until she has clear menopause symptoms, you know, the hot flashes, vaginal dryness, night sweats. Some of the other early symptoms, which is like brain fog, being easily distractible, you know, having a hard time focusing, you know, I think that sometimes they kind of write those things off, and they don't listen as much. And so it's sometimes I would say of all the patients that come to see me, especially at Winona, um, 9 times out of 10, most of them have been told no or gotten a roadblock before they've made it to us. So they're just so grateful to finally have a venue and a forum to be able to get their concerns addressed.
And is this something to, like, I don't want to say that it's simple, but like a hormone panel, would this show up in blood work to confirm that yes, this
Well,
is in fact what's going on?
it's a good question. So with female hormones, the hard part is our female hormones are not so cut and dry. It's not like checking an iron level and then replacing your iron supplement. And the same, like the hormonal, the endocrine system in our body is so complicated. And almost every other hormone system, like our thyroid in particular, like you can check a thyroid lab, give more thyroid medication, and the thyroid responds appropriately. Our female hormones are released in such a pulsatile fashion and they are released at different times of the day, different times of the month. There's a lovely chart of the menstrual cycle that kind of shows you in general what overall like estrogen levels are doing, progesterone levels are doing. But when you look at the lines, they're like roller coasters. They're up and down throughout the month. So the problem is as a woman's aging and her ovaries are aging, there might be a day where the ovaries are like, hey, we're good. You know, as if the ovaries had a mind and could talk. And the hormones that particular day, when you check them, are totally normal. But then the next week after that, the woman's suffering and up all night with night sweats. But that one particular day that she had the labs done, everything looks normal. So it's like taking a snapshot in time of something that's a very dynamic process.
Okay.
And so the labs aren't necessary anymore. You know, years ago, we used to say, well, let's check a follicle stimulating hormone level and see where you're at. The follicle stimulating hormone is going to get really high once you've stopped and once you've actually completed menopause. But for those women that are still in the journey and are still in the process of having this change happen, which can go on for 10 years, the FSH might be totally normal. And so even though they're, you know, experiencing vaginal dryness and problems with arousal, or they might be starting to have hot flashes, their levels might be normal. And then what happens is like you don't give them treatment, but they still feel horrible. So HRT is one of those things that should really be prescribed based on symptom profile and then adjusted based on how a patient responds to the medication. So, you know, we basically our rule of thumb is to start low, you know, do the lowest dose for the shortest duration possible with any medication, really, because you don't want to start high dose and expose somebody to side effects and risks. But really, we start low and then we titrate and kind of tweak it as we need to until we get those symptoms under better control. Because it's all about quality of life. And then there also is the added health benefits of adding estrogen in as you're losing it, because the estrogen is so protective for our hearts and for our bone health to protect against osteoporosis as well. And now there's more and more information coming out that estrogen is really protective for our brain tissue and our neurotransmitters as well. And so the thought is that, you know, if you are on hormone replacement therapy after the age where your ovaries are no longer producing enough estrogen, that the HRT can be protective against dementia and development of Alzheimer's too. So there's so many good things. It's like testosterone is the good hormone for men's bodies. Estrogen is really a good hormone for women's bodies. And it has a role in almost every tissue in our body. So it's no surprise that when we lose it, we start to get all these things manifesting in our body, and our body starts to respond so negatively.
So it should almost kind of be common practice then that when women are entering menopause that they are exploring some sort of hormone therapy.
Absolutely. Yeah, I
Okay.
mean, 100% of women will go through menopause, but not
Right.
necessarily every woman will need to go on a pharmaceutical, to treat that.
Mhm.
Some women are able to do lifestyle changes. Some women are able to do like over-the-counter supplements to help them somewhat, because every woman's experience is unique. But it's important to make sure that you have that conversation and that it's available, I think, to women out there.
Good. It sounds like it's almost needs to be brought into practice. I know that med school and training is ever evolving and they can only fit so much in, but
Yeah.
sounds like as we progress, it's going to be something that's going to be eventually, hopefully, more
Oh, yeah.
commonplace. At least have the discussion with your
Absolutely.
provider instead of just your annual check-in. Away
Exactly.
you go. Okay.
I think so. That I would like to see that. I mean, I think in
Right.
med school, I maybe had 1 or 2 hours of training on menopause, and then in residency, we may have spent like a week of 4 years, talking
Mhm.
about menopause and HRT. And it was one of those things that you study for the book. And then, like, I remember my attendings telling me as a resident, like, you're going to learn this, but because of the WHI study, like, you're never going to prescribe this. Women aren't asking for this anymore. So you don't really need to know the prescribing part. Just memorize what you need to know for the test, you
That sounds about right for school. It does. It
right?
does. So, where do you see yourself in By Winona in 5 years?
Well, I mean, right now, I'm starting to grow my role as an educator, and starting to represent the company more in outreach like this, like doing podcasts, doing webinars. Um, I really hope that in 5 years, like, we are bigger. I feel like I'm hoping that there's more menopause care available out there for every woman. I hope that for patients that are seeing the success with us and the success with our treatment, that they go back to their physicians, and that those physicians that were so reticent to prescribe are starting to see the positive benefits, that maybe will change the hearts and minds and have a second order effect, and that the medical
Right.
community will start to respond by making care more accessible. Um, and so I think that's kind of, I just want to grow that part of it.
That makes sense. And it's a lofty goal, but a good one at the same time because it's not unrealistic.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And I know this is probably a hard question for you to answer. And we've talked about so much around women's hormones and just OB in general. But what is a trend that you are seeing in the field of women's healthcare this year?
So I'd say a big trend right now, especially in the menopause space, I see a lot of women being put on birth control pills for hormone replacement, but it's not a good trend. And we need to stop the trend. Because it's one of those things that they have completely different goals and purposes. So, like, when you take a birth control pill, the whole goal is to provide you with enough synthetic hormone to suppress your body's own internal mechanism for ovulation. So
Right.
we're giving you synthetic hormones to suppress your natural hormone. So although some women might get a little bit of benefit of their symptoms, their menopause symptoms with that, it's just kind of counterintuitive because it's not doing what we want it to do. So I wish more docs out there would stop doing that. Especially if a woman does not need birth control to prevent pregnancy,
Right.
stop giving women birth control. It is not a magic pill. I just feel like so many docs out there are just very comfortable with it because they've been prescribing it for years. It's what's in their wheelhouse and it's what they're comfortable with.
Right.
But I wish more doctors would start actually giving hormone replacement therapy instead of birth control when it comes to women in their 40s and 50s. Um, the other thing I would say that's trending and that's more out there is that women are starting to take more control of their sex life and their sexual experience, which I think is a really good thing. And so I think that there's more dialogue out there for women talking about what's important, And I think that there's more in the media now, like there's a few Netflix specials now focused purely on women's pleasure and the importance of that. I think that's another part of the whole equation that's important for our women's health that's not been focused on at all. So much money and time has gone into erectile dysfunction and not so much into women's sexual dysfunction. So, I think that that's a trend I'd like to continue seeing, that it's being driven by the consumer and the
Right.
patients. They are wanting better, they're wanting more, and people are responding. So I think that's a good thing. So I
Okay.
guess that's one negative and one positive thing, right?
That's perfect. At least it's not always, this is a positive thing about this year, because yes, there is a negative trend that, like you said, getting the word out there will hopefully push at least a few people in the right direction of not doing that anymore. Well, Kat, it's been so great talking with you today. And to all my listeners, you can follow By Winona on Instagram. There is a link right there to the website, which is just bywinona.com. If you are in that age range where you're thinking you need things like that, quick and easy consults, right? You
Oh
fill out your
yeah.
forms, and then when
And
you go,
honestly, if
really
they're
easy
not
to
in that
access.
age range and they want to learn more, there's a lot of free education on the site, because I think it's even more important for women to learn about this before they're actually in the thick of it.
Right. Makes sense to be
Yeah.
prepared, right? We
Yeah.
research preschools 3 years before our kids get there, but not
Right.
about what's going to happen to us in life.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay, well, Kat, it's been great talking to you today, and take care.
You
Have a great day.
too. Thank you so much for having me.